Welcome to Prague, Czech Republic. I'm here in the center of the beautiful Old Town Square, the best square in the whole world. You can come here thousands of times and you'll still find something new. You'll never get bored. See, they're still building. To start off, a little bit about me. My name is Tom. I was made in America. My parents are from Czechoslovakia. That country no longer exists anymore, but that's where they were born. They escaped during the communist times because they weren't in the party and it wasn't a lot of fun for them. If you were in the communist party, life was good. If you weren't, you had to really struggle to survive. First things first, we got to address the goose in the room. This guy right here, Jan Hus, his name translates to John the Goose. He's probably a top 5 Czech in history. He's a Catholic preacher who saw something wrong with the state of the church in the 1400s. And he couldn't be quiet, couldn't keep it to himself, and he started a huge Protestant Reformation. Thanks to this guy is probably why Czech Republic is as atheist as it is today, while Slovakia is completely Catholic. They didn't have a goose to follow. They really clung on to their religion with the developments of the times, through the monarchies, through communism, whereas the Czechs, by the end of it, said, you don't want us to be religious? No problem. We're fine with that. We're happy to adapt to any situation. Czechs are masters of surviving, and that's what we'll learn here. So John Goose, not so much a survivalist, but he knew his name would live on forever if he held on to his morals, to his principles. He didn't like what the church was doing with selling indulgences, people paying to forgive their sins, the serving of communion, the study of the Bible, the interpretation in general. In those days, you had to really adhere to what the church was saying, and it was very dangerous to even stray a little bit. So he strayed more than a bit, got kicked out of the church, and he had to go into exile, had to hide out. Finally, they said, look, let's talk about it. Your ideas are interesting. Come to Germany. We want to hear what you have to say. He went there. They said, okay, we're going to burn you alive unless you retract everything that you said and change your views. He said, nope. And as they were setting up his stake and setting him on fire, his final words were, for the truth. Pretty powerful stuff. For the truth. It's a very important thing. Truth will set you free. We still talk about this guy. We don't talk about the people who burned him. It's a very powerful message, in my opinion. The result started a huge backlash from the whole Czech country. He developed a following called the Husites, people who follow the goose. And it was a real mess, let me tell you. The Husites, within 5 years, started a war against the Pope. Yeah, this was a crazy idea. Outnumbered 10-1. The forces of the Pope never lose. But somehow, these crafty gooses managed to beat back the church. They followed a guy named Jan Žižka, a one-eyed general, who never gave up, never stopped fighting. He has a new movie about him you can check out, Medieval, one of the highest budget films out of the whole Czechoslovakia. And he lost his eye in battle. He lost another eye in battle, kept fighting. The legend has it that in his last battle, when he finally got shot, fell off his horse. His troops put him up on a stick like a puppet, sent him back into the front, scared the hell out of the enemy, and he won one last time. Under the Husites, they employed guerrilla warfare, really crafty tactics to use the environment to their advantage, posting up on hills, and most notably, they invented an early form of tanks or battle wagons by taking regular old carriages like we see these guys here and putting plated armor on it, sticking spears out of it, cannons, guns, and moving them around the battlefield in a formation that was just really obnoxious, really hard to take down. And they did it. They took down the Catholic army, and although it's quite a glorified story, on the other side, there was a real lack of law and order for the following 200 years. Interesting thing to note about the John Goose statue here is surrounding it, where the flowers and the grass are, used to be water because of these guys on top of this building here. What's currently the tourist building, which allows me to legally share this fantastic information with you. We'll find on top statues of guys with hoses. What a strange thing. This is a more modern building than some of those Gothic ones. And in those days, firemen were the most important people in town. If your house got in a jam on purpose or maybe by accident, these were the guys that could bail you out. If we look around the square, we can see all different architecture styles, from the Gothic clock tower to the neo-Gothic, more recently constructed town hall addition on it. Here at St. Nicholas Church, you have Baroque, getting a little newer. Carrying on, behind the old goose, we have a succession style, more modern. Then we see some Art Nouveau with the firefighters. Behind me, we have the most viewed, least visited monument in the whole Prague. That is a tin church, the Church of Our Lady Before Tin. If we look closely, you'll notice there's two different sizes of the tower. One's a little bit thicker. There's two stories. One's the Czech one and one's the real one. Some say it was made to represent the feminine, the thinner, the masculine, the bigger. Others say they ran out of materials and had to make do. So you decide what's Czech, what's true, but all night those towers light up a beautiful orange Harry Potter view. And the reason it's so difficult to visit is because nobody knows how to get in. Doesn't have a real clear entrance, but just go straight ahead. In Prague, you have tons of shortcuts, secret passageways. Just go on in, say hello to Jesus, no charge. It's really beautiful. And this little trick, if you want to go to other churches that you have to pay normally, go during church times, say your prayers, and you get in. No problem. Also, while we're on tricks, a great place to take a nap in a church, great acoustics, they play music for you. You don't have to worry about losing your things. Generally a pretty safe bunch hanging out there. And my top travel tip while we're on it, wake up early. Get out early. You don't got these crazy people who went out partying, the lazy people, the tricksters, just good hardworking folks. In general, Prague is a very safe place, but make it easier on yourself. Go out early, enjoy life. Enjoy the sun. Now we're reaching this crazy monolith in the center of the Prague. This is a newly reconstructed feature. It's originally from the Austro-Hungary Empire as a symbol of their conquest of the Swedes. The Swedes made a lot of problems for us. Na zdraví. Nice driving in Czech. Easy way to remember how to say cheers to your health. Nice driving. When you want to cheers, na zdraví. Eye contact is important as well. You do all that, you're going to be a happy, healthy tourist. Now, the Marian Column, what's the beef? Austro-Hungary was when they brought the church back. After the guy Jan Hus did his thing, the Hussite Wars raged on for over 200 years. In the 1600s, Habsburgs came back and they forced Catholicism upon the Czech people, the Bohemian people. This is an important point. This area where we are, the center of Czech Republic, and the surrounding area, it wasn't really Czech until 100 years ago, 1919, after the First World War. It was always Bohemia. It was all kingdoms, all part of Austria-Hungary, Habsburg Empire. Before that, God knows. So, Habsburgs brought that back, and you can see a little bit of Mary on top, a lot of religious symbolism. And Czechs didn't like it when they finally had their new country after the First World War in 1919. They were having a party here on the square. A couple of drunks came up, climbed on top, took it down. Finally in 2020, as a way to remember our history, they decided it should be put back up. It's a little bit out of place, a little bit ominous, but an interesting little bit about it is it used to help them tell the time in the 1600s. When the shadow of the column would fall on the meridian, this line in the stone here to the west, that was precisely high noon in ancient Bohemia. So it was good for something. And the Austrians, hey, they're not as cool as the Czechs, but what are you gonna do? Carrying on, we're going to the top. Cheese, the astronomical clock. On our way, we got tons of beautiful buildings. Got a Starbucks, always a guaranteed bathroom. When in doubt, McDonald's or Starbucks will help you out. And if you're a fan of classic cinema, you might notice this little place was in Mission Impossible. Tom Cruise ran out of this Starbucks as he blew it up. Here, under the shadow of the clock tower, this is the site of the first defenestration of Prague. First of at least 3 that I know of. It happened when the followers of the old John Goose were parading around town belligerently, and allegedly a rock was thrown at them from this window. So they ran up, threw down the sheriff, the judge, the mayor to their death down here. When the king at the time found out, he died of shock, allegedly. Wenceslav IV, one of many Wenceslav, the fourth, actually. But just under the site of the first defenestration, we see the end and the results of the final third defenestration. In 1621, the Protestants were at it for 200 years, going strong, doing what they will. But it all came to an end at the Battle of White Mountain, when the Habsburg monarchy finally took them and the Swedes out, put up their column, and executed 27 members of the Bohemian families that were causing a ruckus right here on the Old Town Square. This used to be a famous site for executions. It was a thing to do back in the day. Now we have football, soccer, etc. Which leads me to my hat. Bohemians, one of the worst teams in Prague. That's why I like them. They don't make a mess. They're calm. When they have a game, nobody is out there making noise in the streets. I love it. I'm from New York. I don't like any of those teams. I just want peace. Talk about history. And that's what we call a smooth transition. Now we're going to make our way over to the magical astronomical clock. 500 years ago, this is what the citizens of Prague, old Bohemia, used to plan their potions. You need to have the right stars, the right time, the right moon, and this has 11 functions to help us decide just that, as well as remind us that life is short. First off, the main attraction here in the middle, we see the sun is over a circle of zodiac signs. At any given time, if you see a picture of this clock, you can tell when it was taken by looking there. You can see it's early in the Leo month. More simply, they installed a new one up top. They'll tell you the regular time. And then there you have, around on the outer dial, Old Bohemian time, which is a different time. More importantly, we got these 4 weirdos here. These are 3 of the deadliest sins. Homeboy checking himself out here is all about vanity. This guy here with a bag of coins, it's all about greed. And fellow over here strumming on his guitar is just trying to have a good time. When the clock strikes, we're gonna see Death over here, skeleton, friendly guy, starts shaking his head. Yeah, yeah, yeah. The time's going. You gotta come with me. And all 3 of these guys collectively shake their heads. No, please, no. What does it mean? Time keeps going. It doesn't stop. In the windows, you're going to have the apostles of Jesus Christ going through there, marching on down. Interesting about Prague is, since the time of Charles IV, this place was built with astrology, numerology, alchemy, and the church as the foundation for every step in its building process. As we see here as well with the final dial, which turns 1 click every day, where it's got a name of the saint whose feast or birthday it is. Woo! Nice driving, man. In Czech Republic, every day is a party. So it's important, along with having a birthday, you have a normal Christian name so you can get down on the name days, where everyone's going to come around, give you flowers, say, hey, good job, Tom. And what's even cooler is, depending on the country, you can have multiple name days because they're not all uniform. So I have one in Czech, one in Slovak, none in America, but I'm too old for that stuff anyway. One final detail about the old town hall here is you got every half an hour a new wedding happening. So we're waiting for the victims to come out. But it's a very popular spot for Czechs and Slovaks to get married. Imagine that. Getting married in a place like this. You can do it too if the price is right. Give me a call, Very Gringo. We'll set you up. Outside of the clock, you'll find the fanciest and the cheapest bathrooms in town. This is the Scouts building, the British Scouts office, where you can always get a coffee, find a piano playing. Really amazing place for relax. And then next door, you have Prince Hotel, rooftop views, incredible fancy cocktails, huge menu options. A little bit pricey, but definitely worth a date. If you're gonna go up there, take your lover, take your friend. Some of the best views in the old town, 360 degrees. So we're gonna carry on now through the most touristy street in Prague. Very narrow, very busy, and we're gonna pass by a classic tourist trap that always gets people turning their heads and blocks up the view, blocks up the traffic. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about my favorite tourist traps. It's a very safe city, Prague, so you don't have to worry so much about getting taken advantage of unless you let yourself get taken advantage of. And as a tourist, you kind of got to accept sometimes that's going to happen. That's why I just recommend to wake up early and avoid any hustlers. But if you want to listen to me, maybe you can avoid that on your trip here. So check souvenirs, that's all good and well. But this puppy here, the old museum of what? Sex machines. Yep, that'll get people to stop and look. All kinds of weird things in there. Never been, not really my thing. Of course, you have the classic taxis. No matter where you go, it always seems like they're a gamble. That's how they make their money, being obnoxious. Here in Prague now, we have Bolt. It's like Uber, just more plentiful and cheaper. So when you come, download the app, Bolt, and get where you need to go. Bing, bing, boom. Next up, watch out for ATMs. If it's not an official bank ATM, don't go there. It just says ATM, or even worse, Euronet. They're going to take a lot of money from you. If it's from a big Czech bank or wherever country in, local bank, probably going to take less money from you. So that's cool. Also, terrible is the mini markets. If you see a place that's got alcohol, weed, and just bottles of water for sale here in the city center, and it's not a real official chain store, like a supermarket, it's going to be triple, quadruple the price. So all around the center, if you want to go for something close by, it's going to be called Žabka. Otherwise, all these little touristic holes in the wall. Better to go a little bit off the square. Trdelník. This here. Trdelník over here. These chimney cakes. Not officially Czech. It's actually Hungarian. It's a sweet, tasty treat. I'd recommend split it, at least with another person, because one person can't finish it, especially stuffed with ice cream. Too sweet, too rich. Don't waste food. Next up, we got money change. Always go one street away, 2 streets away, and you'll find something better. If we go just off the Wenceslav Square, just off the Old Town Square, you're going to find a better rate, easier, no stress. And definitely don't change with a weirdo on the street who's shuffling bills at you in a high-stress situation. That's a quick way to end up with some Belarusian rubles, or the currency of a country that doesn't exist, or monopoly money. Souvenir shops, if you see anything that's USSR, Soviet, star, hammer, sickle, that's not the deal. Real Czechs don't like any of that stuff, and you're in the wrong country to be buying it, frankly. We don't have a good history with that. And if you're gonna get some of this crystal, check glass. It's a nice gift to bring home. For nice souvenirs, I recommend bring home a bottle of Bekharovka if you got room in your luggage, check bag, or some nice chocolates. Check wafers, Polonada Platki. They got the little blue sticks. You gotta eat them very fresh, otherwise they lose their crunch and they're all soft, but still tasty. And then you have the circles, like giant church wafers, that are also lovely, and you can eat a box in no time. And it's hard to get, you don't get them anywhere else. So, interesting little bit, these bells, they say in these old medieval Renaissance cities were used for calming, making the people happy, and that each bell had a different frequency to tune the people. If you believe in frequency, energy, these type of things, it'll be easy for you to get on board with that. But what's really strange is during times of war, like World War II, the Nazis gathered up all the bells and took them down and turned them into bullets, cannonballs, weapons. So if you want to instill fear, danger, stress, anger, and war using these bells of peace and love and harmony, to me, kind of makes too much sense to not be true. But that's just me. Every year, Czech has some new revolution. 5 years ago, they had the bright idea to put candy stores everywhere. Super high markup, sugar costs nothing, and everyone still buys it even though you're killing yourself. And that's what's going on here. You got these funny looking things. It's a great attraction. I don't know why Captain Candy, nautical theme, okay. But that's what it is. Gonna rot your teeth. They're everywhere. Gonna make money. 7, 8 years ago, there was a burger revolution. More recently, we had beef ribs showed up everywhere. And frankly, if you come to Prague today, the quality, the service, the level of everything is top notch. Despite the history of Czechs being grumpy and not always having the best selection of things, go back to communism. Nowadays, incredible, really competitive. Ever since COVID, it's hard to find a bad place. If you go somewhere and they give you an attitude, just walk out. Don't deal with that. We're almost at the Wenceslav Square, but first I want to show you this amazing little strip where we can watch the old commute to work of Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. Back here is the Estates Theater, the last place where Mozart had his Don Giovanni premiere, his last play. And on the other side of the boulevard, we have his old house. He used to hang out at a bar just across the street there. After he finished his play at the Estates Theater, he would go down this strip and cause chaos. He was a legend in Prague. Go out for parties all night, ladies, drinking. You can imagine. The character John Giovanni, this playboy, badass, was based on him. In the end, he caught a terminal disease here, went back to Austria where he spent his final days, passed away. But it was always Prague that he most vibed with. The Germans, the Austrians, although he was from there, never really accepted him as one of their own. Germans, they love rule, they love rules, they love order. And that brings me to an interesting point on their influence on the Czech culture and language. Slovakian, Polish, the further east you go, more Slavic, the more Russian. Serbians are very close to Russian in a culture. Now I'm talking about things I don't know as much, but what I do know, German had a huge influence on Czech. A lot of words are actually just straight up German words. Dishka, Tringelt, tip, Schmittets, finish. And what they did was, with their language, as with their way of life, is they took this German desire to have laws and rules and a bunch of red tape, and then they made loopholes for everything. So In the Czech language, you have more exceptions than there are rules. And what would happen is these Germans would come over and try to learn it. And they couldn't, because they loved the rules and they dove headfirst into the books, but they were just confused by all the exceptions. They say, but this doesn't make sense. This doesn't go with this. As a result, the word for Germans, as in their country, they're the Deutsch. In English, it's Germans. Portuguese, Alemão. Aleman. Czech people call them Niemcy, which translates to the mutes, the people who can't speak. As they'd come over here and be like, them, they can't speak. And the same with the laws. Millions of laws in Czech Republic, but even more loopholes. There's tons of ways to get around everything. And that brings us to Wenceslav Square, the new town. We just crossed over from the old town to the new town. 600 years old, pretty new. But where I am here, all used to be water. This was a moat separating the old and the new town with crocodiles and everything. This metro stop is actually named Mustek, translates to the moat. So when there was a disagreement in the old town and you wanted to settle it without getting the law involved, you go out to the wild new town, have your duels, have your fisticuffs, settle all your problems here. Originally, it was 3 cities: Old Town, New Town, and the castle side, Radčanská, Malastrana. But that was all combined into one. Now, here in the new town, in the Wenceslav Square, is the best time to bring up the reason I'm here today. The communists, God bless them. Thank you for being so boring that you caused my parents to leave here. As I said, if you're in the party, it was a good time. You had a good place to live. You had a good place to go to school. You had food, education. You could travel. You could go in and out of the border from the east to the west, no problem. But my grandfather, a journalist, he said something bad about the communists. He signed a document against them. My mom, my brother, sister got kicked out of school, had to live in these little tough apartments, had to scrape together not nice jobs just to survive. And after she escaped, it got even worse for the rest of my family. They were being persecuted, well, watched. I will say, communism was never such, frankly, it wasn't so bad as compared to Romania, Ukraine, Poland, which was a lot more violent, a lot more strict, not cool. Czechoslovakia was always kind of friends with the West, a lot of influence, for whatever reason, protected. So you didn't have freedom of speech, you'd probably go to jail. But anyway, don't want to offend anybody there. That's my opinion. Feel free at any time to leave in the comments below if you think I'm a fool. And give us a like. Share this video with your friends if you think it's helpful, if you think it's cool. So, this was the spot for communists. Up and down here, you had the shops. This was the old horse stables of town. So they used to sell horses here. There used to be a tram that went up and down here. And believe it or not, there's going to be a tram again soon. I love those trams. And in the 80s, 70s, there used to be guys out here hustling coupons. Now, if you wanted anything from the West under communism, there was one shop that you could get it. And there's only one form of payment at that shop. Government issued vouchers called boni. And you could only get these boni by working in a foreign company. And they would pay you in the foreign currency, transfer it, deposit the boni into your account. But most people didn't have this privilege of a foreign employer. So these hustlers, Vexlaki, they were called, which comes from the German word Wechsel. They would work in restaurants, they would work on buses, they would make deals with foreigners, give them a better exchange rate on the black market for the currency, and then they would take those boni and sell them for as much as 5 times their value the local Czechs here on the square. Additionally, you have tons of hotels here, international hotels. So people would come to these international hotels. Girls would come there to meet up with rich Westerners, Arabs, British, and people come to hustle up a meal, hustle up a magazine. If you found a foreigner with a magazine, that was gold back in the day. Wexlaki. Yep, Arrow Wexlaki will be out here on the corners. Another interesting thing you'll notice here, a lot of empty prime real estate. This is also super communist. Those guys back in the day, they didn't care about what was located where. They would turn a place like this into potato storage. Potatoes. Nowadays, why is it empty? Disputes. A lot of times you have corporations that own these places or just rich families who live all across the globe, and they don't really often come together to decide what to do on these things. Or frankly, greed, jealousy, selfishness. The owners have their money parked here. It's a safe place. It's going to keep on appreciating in value. So they don't really care if somebody turns it into a business and makes money off it. Frankly, that's maybe just more of a hassle than it's worth. And they'd rather not deal with it, so they leave it empty. So it's just kind of a lack of organization. And as a result, what you'll rarely see anywhere else in the world is top-notch real estate in the center of a town, completely empty. Now here at the top of the square, we have the National Museum, freshly renovated, beautiful, fresh, all white. Took 5 years to do because hard to find an artisan that knows how to work with old stones. And this guy right here is King Wenceslav, the good King Wenceslav. You might have heard the song about the fella, Saint Wenceslav. What would happen here is people meet up. This is a legendary meeting place for whether you're going on a date. You can tell people to meet under the horse's tail. There's a statue of a horse. Or you want to have a revolution, you do your revolution here too. This is where famously Russian tanks came in 1968 for the crushing of the Prague Spring, which was, the Prague Spring. After World War II, Czechoslovakia wasn't exactly a fan of the West. It was really the Russians who won the war by taking the brunt of the damage. Americans came in and took the glory, as we like to do, but the Russians were fighting the longest, most casualties, and finally were the ones who liberated Czechoslovakia. They showed up here. They got first dibs. But also, when it came time to the free democratic elections after the fall of the Nazis, there was a photo from the Munich Agreement, which was when the Nazis came in and annexed Czechoslovakia without any resistance from our Western allies. Czechoslovakia was ready to defend itself. Czechoslovakia had really good perimeters, golden hands, good at fixing things, making guns. We had tons of industry, tons of minerals, very valuable place. But nobody helped us. They had a photo there of the Western powers, British, France, standing there with the Nazis, agreeing to let this land go into Nazi hands. So in the end, communists won in the election and established a puppet government. So essentially, it was a satellite of the Soviet Union. Never part of the Soviet Union officially. Finally, in '68, we had a great president, Alexander Dubček. He brought in dubstep. He brought in new reforms for freedom of speech, freedom of travel, crazy things that USSR did not agree with. And they told him, you better stop. You better stop. He said, yeah. They came over. They said, you better stop. What happened? We had this fantastic Prague Spring. Everyone was loving it, dancing around in their Speedos out on the town. And in August 1968, on my mother's name day, tanks rolled in right here on Wenceslav Square. And they said, that's it. People driving the tanks, they didn't want to be here. Czechs didn't want them here. They painted over the signs coming into Prague so they could confuse them. The most Czech resistance you can imagine. But as a result, we had officially become, as a result, we officially became Czechoslovak Socialist Republic, occupied by the Soviet Union. Fantastic, right? Everything was gray. Even if you were in the party and having a good time, there was no color in the city, no life, no trust. Everybody was snitching on everybody just to snitch. It's crazy, crazy energy. Didn't know who to trust. We're going to carry on down the moat while I carry on talking about communism, my favorite subject. So, Wenceslas Square, great place to talk about communism. Down here we have National Street, Narodny Třída, a great place to talk about the Velvet Revolution, the fall of communism. So, what happens is 1989. I'm going to get away from this music and talk a little more calm down here, away from the madness. Wenceslas Square, in my particular opinion, is a demonic place full of strip clubs, casinos, craziness. As you can see by that sound that was blasting from me, as you can see by the communist presence that went through there. At the hotels, back in the day, everything was tapped, wired. So when these Westerners would come there, they would be recorded, followed, traced. Now the good thing about being in Prague in those days was you were safe under the eyes of the international community. Whereas villages, some of these more eastern countries, as I mentioned, didn't have that presence of the Westerners, and the communists needed to maintain popular, good appearances, and as a result, just overall better quality of life if you're in here. In summer, in 1989, down this street back here, we had the final drops of communism. Things were winding down for a while. I mean, it wasn't a sustainable system. They created these quotas. They created instability. They weren't able to trade freely. Economically, not a great recipe for success. Pressure from the West, biggest government in the world, all built up to freedom, so they say. Other people say, with the changeover to capitalism, the same people who were stealing under communism were able to steal twice. Because what was the problem with communism? Dishonesty. You had to trust that the people in power really had good intentions for you, and oftentimes they didn't. And once these people entered the capitalist system, already owning the means of production, already well educated, already having all the property, they were able to steal twice as much. You need to check out Karl Kryl. I got a video about him. The famous revolutionary songwriter talks about this in beautiful Czech poetic language.
Jsem dnes stejen, pravím vám, jako kdysi, nejin. Tiše sobě zahnívám na smetišti dějin. Demokracie rozkvétá, byť s kosmetickou vadou. Ti, kteří kradli po léta, dnes dvojnásobně kradou.
Here, this is one of the best places to take a pee. Any real mall in the center. Go to a DM. They're amazing druggery where you can get all kinds of hygienic supplies, fantastic healthy snacks, fresh water, good things. I'm gonna go in here, freshen up. Bubble tea. This would probably be one of the newer additions to the arsenal of Czech Republic. 1,000,001 bubble teas, 1,000,001 flavors, all sugar, all silly. Here we are in front of the old Estates Theater from the back, where they displayed the finale of Mozart's career, the premiere of Don Giovanni, Don Juan. And later on, in the late 80s, Czech director Miloš Forman filmed Amadeus here during communism. So it was very tricky for production to get what they needed, to get the permissions, supplies, everything. It was quite a to-do, a wild situation. But they did it. It's a beautiful film. Check it out as well. And here we go to the more esoteric side of things. this amazing Czech Cubist cafe. One of a kind. The whole building is Cubist. Yeah, didn't mention that on Old Town Square. One of a kind architecture. Interesting to know you got two cafes here. Ground floor, more touristic. Top floor, better views, better prices. Much more friendly. Take your bathroom break there, enjoy. And when we talk about esoteric, the Knights Templar are one of the top players in this magical, mystical chronology of things. And that's what you'll notice right here. Strange statue on the corner. The Black Madonna. They say every headquarters of the Knights Templar had a Black Madonna in front. And this is allegedly one of the old homes of the Knights Templar, the Black Madonna and the Cubist Cafe. What were they officially? Basically the original way to send your money abroad. They were people who were dedicated to God, and they wanted pilgrims to get from across Europe to the Holy Land, and they were there to help them do it. They devoted themselves to it. They devoted all their wealth, and you could leave your money with them in England, go down to Jerusalem, to the Holy Land, and withdraw it from them there. Because if you traveled across Europe, it was dangerous, uncertain, you get robbed, show's over. There's no insurance, there's no credit cards, no Western Union, 600 years ago. So nowadays, they no longer hang out here. There's a few places in the old town associated with them. We have Templova Street here. Rumor has it, if we cross the bridge and go to the Maltese Embassy, the Knights of Malta still hang out there, and you can find out more if you really want to dig. So we're gonna go back through Old Town Square one more time. We can do it 1,000 more times, you're still gonna love it. We're gonna check out the Jewish Quarter, learn a little bit of mysticism on our final stop of the tour. The last leg of our Old Town tour takes us to the Jewish Quarter here. Standing in front of the home of Franz Kafka, his birthplace. He actually lived all over Prague. This is one of the most legendary Czech authors. They love him in Germany because although he was a Czech Prager, he wrote in German. That's like modern days. You would write in English to get a bigger breadth of audience. Now, what's important about Kafka is he didn't want to release his works. His best friend did it for him. So we know him as a kind of depressed, depersonalized, detached man who is struggling with a lot of things in his head. But imagine, you didn't want to get your works released. I write a lot of comedy, a lot of jokes that I hope never see the light of day. I use it as a form of therapy. So take it with a grain of salt. Maybe he was an alright guy, but he's from the Jewish Quarter here. We're going to go down and see the fanciest streets in town. And I'll leave you with a couple of Kafka quotes. Don't bend, don't water it down, don't try to make it logical. Don't bend your own soul according to your fashion. To fashion. Do you. Don't mess around with what other people think, because then you won't be authentic. And another one, he said, I spent my whole life resisting the urge to end it. For him, books were the end-all, be-all, the meaning of living. Outside of another quote where he says, the whole point of life is that it ends. So, YOLO, the OG YOLO, Franz Kafka. Let's go see Pařížská Street, fanciest street in town, and the Jewish Quarter. Welcome to fantastic Pařížská Street, the Champs-Élysées of Prague. Named after Paris, of course. We have all the fanciest stores, Bulgari, Rolex on the other side. So what happened here about 100 years ago was this was all Jewish ghetto. It was all abandoned because at this point, Jews had more freedom of movement. It was a much better age for them. So they left. This was all dilapidated and abandoned, and they smashed it all and turned it into what it is today. A good investment, I would say, a lot more profitable. Quick rundown of the Jewish people in Europe, in Prague. Basically, their fate was heavily determined by who was in charge at the time. So we have history of Jewish people in Europe in Bohemia over 1,000 years is the first records from a traveler that came through the area, and he saw the Jewish community working, doing business, worshiping right here. However, things turned for the worse in the year 1200 in the 13th century. We had a guy, Pope Innocent, who thought the Jews were guilty of killing Jesus Christ. So he put out an edict restricting their freedoms. One of many pogroms that the Jewish people have had to face in their history. Pogroms means destruction in Hebrew. But then you got King Charles, the best guy we got. He was more liberal with them, granted them more freedoms in the 1300s. We had Rudolph in the 16th century, again, way into mysticism. Now, a lot of the hate and accusations against Jewish people are tied with this mysticism that they themselves are quite proud of in their culture. We'll talk about the golem that they legendarily made to protect them, a man of clay and dirt and water, air, and fire. So Rudolph was well into this stuff. He granted them liberties. Next up, we have Maria Theresa, who was a female ruler, instrumental in building the castle, Prague Castle. We'll learn about that in our next tour. But she did not like Jews at all. They suffered greatly in the 1700s under her, but her son went the other way. Emperor Joseph II is actually what the name of this area is today, Josefov. So here we are in the epicenter of the Jewish old town of Prague. First, we got this lovely pastel building in Rococo style. It's the high synagogue because why is it high? Nothing to do with cannabis, but the prayer room is here on the first floor. And even better, the main attraction in this town, the old new synagogue, the oldest continuously functioning Jewish house of worship. It's legendarily been built with stones from Jerusalem that were flown in. They were lent for the construction of this fantastic synagogue on the grounds that they would be returned once the Messiah comes. So this old new synagogue from the 13th century is a great opportunity to talk about mystic Jewish traditions. There's a legendary rabbi from the 17th century, in the 1600s, named Judah ben Lo. They called him the Maharal of Prague, which means teacher, Maharal. And in order to protect the Jewish population from the pogroms, from the destruction that they were facing, he summoned a creature known as golem. In Hebrew, golem means cocoon or stupid one. And it was basically just a big bodyguard that would go around searching packages. At the time, Jews were being accused of turning children into matzah. So he would go around looking in boxes, and if there was any children in there, he would apprehend them, whoever's package it was. And if anyone was messing with Jews, he would smash them. So he created this golem by summoning the four elements. He took clay from the Vltava and he brought it to the highest hill where nobody had dug before. With fire and potions, he crafted it, and then he wrote on its head truth and put the word of God in his mouth, and voila, came to life. However, one Sabbath, a Saturday, when they weren't supposed to be working, he forgot to turn it off. He was the only guy who could control this thing. And Golem went nuts, and he started smashing this synagogue right here, the old new synagogue. He was shaking it, giant clay monster. Now this building has survived a lot. So various fires, First World War, Second World War, communism, and a golem. So the rabbi, he jumped out onto the golem's shoulders, erased the first letter from the word truth, which went from emet to met in Hebrew, and met actually means dead. And he took the word of God out of his mouth. Golem turned into dust and water. He took those elements and placed them up top in the attic, where he remains today, ready to be summoned when the Jewish people need him again. Whatever. Another cool story, this clock over here is just a classic story about Czech people that are embracing other people's cultures too much. There was a Czech guy who heard that Jews read backwards, so he built a clock with the Jewish numerals and made it go backwards from counterclockwise. As you can see, instead of fixing it, changing this curious thing, they added a new one up top at the right time and kept this one as a very unique artifact, only here in the Jewish Quarter. Another must-visit place while you're here in the Prague Jewish ghetto is the Jewish cemetery right behind me. It's a free tour, so we're not going to go inside, but I'll show you a few things. First of all, this is all graves. So over 400 years, 200,000 Jews have been buried here. They're not allowed to cremate their dead, and they had limited space. So as a result, they piled the bodies up to 12 layers deep. There's a sign that says Cohens can't enter. Me as a Gentile, I said, what? The Cohen sounds like a very Jewish name. Why can't they enter their own cemetery? That's because these are the holy people, the rabbis, the healers, and if they go in there, they're going to be sullied. They're not going to have their full power. I don't know. Jewish tradition. Very mystical. Let's take a sneak peek in this free tour in the Jewish cemetery. We go through the Jewish ghetto, around the old cemetery, find a little door here. We can take a sneak peek what's going on inside. These are hundreds of years old graves. The Rabbi Maharal Judah Low is here, buried as well. And some people wonder about the Jewish tradition of placing little rocks on the graves. These little stones are a way of keeping their spirits here in this dimension with us, and also protecting them in their dimension as well. We're going to finish our tour in a square dedicated to a young student who set himself on fire to protest the Russians invading in 1968. Let's see how that went. So here at Jan Palach Square, in front of this statue in his memory, I must recommend that you don't commit suicide to protest. Nobody really cared after he did this. Recently, people have protested wars by setting themselves on fire. It never seems to really make a lasting effect. As Franz Kafka says, the meaning of life is that it ends. And I think we got to use our time here most effectively, leading by example. Burning yourself isn't a very great example. So tons of great things to take note of here on Jan Palach Square. First off, the amazing Rudolfinum Concert Hall, named after Emperor Rudolph II, the guy who specialized in paying for alchemists and art and all kinds of esoteric things during his reign. They thought he was a bit crazy. They was ignoring war and focusing on too much of the cultural stuff. Some more liberal historians have said, no, this guy did a great job for the culture and development of these types of things. Who knows? It's hard to call anybody crazy, say that anybody doesn't know what they're talking about, so be careful. But he's got a concert hall, the Rudolfinum Concert Hall, right behind me here, with some of the greatest classical musical composers all on top here. That's what those statues are. Next up, theological faculty at Charles University. Unfortunately, here we had a tragedy last December where the shooter was up on this balcony. And rest in peace to all the victims and all the people that have gone too soon. And let's pray for peace and all of the good things. Pray, send out good energy, do your best to help your fellow man so things like these don't have to happen. And take care of yourself. Here we have an amazing faculty of performing arts, ballerinas, drama, opera, you name it. This is the spot. When you're in Prague and you want to catch a show, do it. The quality for the price is unbeatable. They don't get paid very much, performers in Prague, but their loss is your gain. Okay? Go check out an organ concert in one of the greatest, oldest churches in the world. Go check out the ballet. Go check out Don Giovanni, the birthplace. This is a spot to do it. Really, the quality of what you can get while you're here in Prague, food and entertainment, sports. You can go get the world's best rock climbing. And that's about it for this tour here of the Old Town, New Town. Stay tuned for the tour of the castle, Prague Castle, which we have just here across the river. So the castle is actually this lower part here, one of the oldest medieval castles in Central Europe. This big thing in the middle is St. Vitus Cathedral. It was started construction under Charles in the end of the 1300s. Took over 500 years to complete. When in the 1900s, they were like, man, this is getting embarrassing. Let's get this done. There was a lot of wars, a lot of changing rulers, a lot of things, a lot of other priorities. Didn't get to this on the checklist. But St. Vitus, in case you're wondering, I never heard about him before, is the patron saint of oversleeping and dancing. There's the St. Vitus dance. It was a strange affliction over 500 years ago. Now we call it going to a festival. People were just dancing for no reason all around Europe, and it was getting contagious. It was a sickness of dancing. Really weird. Look it up. St. Vitus dance. So it makes sense here in Prague that the patron saint of oversleeping is here watching over people. So when they come out from their dungeons, watch the sunrise here on the Vltava River, they look up at old St. Vitus who says, hey, go take a nap, but get back to it, okay? Stay tuned for the next video, Prague Castle. Until then, guys, thank you very much for watching. If you have any comments, questions, please leave them down below. I would love to hear from you. If you want to leave me any tips for buying a coffee or what I could do better next time, thanks for that too. And if you're coming to Europe, you're going to love it. We're going to be happy to receive you, and you're going to have a great vacation. Thanks again. Stay cool, stay healthy, stay blessed. Peace.